Now, first up, since there was a question already about like what does product analytics actually cover, let's see how you define it. So, Christian, do you want to go first? Tell me, what does product analytics mean to you?
I mean, at the end of the day, if you think about analytics, it's the science of using mathematics and statistics on your data to make better decisions. And product analytics is on using that to improve product experience, product engagement, and ensure your customers have a better experience with the product. So, in a nutshell, if you're using data to be able to analyze and understand and improve all aspects related to product, that's what we call product analytics, at least in my world.
Okay, so pretty broad around like just helping use analytics to improve the product experience for your customers. Okay, let's make this concrete then. Steph, do you want to talk us through what are some use cases of product analytics?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you for the definition, Krishnan. It's a good one. So, what are some great use cases? I can, for example, start with one of the first questions that I got when I joined my first product analytics gig. It wasn't even called product analytics then, but that was certainly what I was doing, what I realized later I was doing. And that was understanding customer retention to doing something. And we already had a question in the chat. Does this refer to only digital products or physical products? And what I want to share is I think product analytics as an industry mostly refers to digital interactions, but it can also be around physical products. So, for example, Nike or someone would really want to do a lot of product analytics to understand interactions around their product, monitoring the product journey from someone understanding what they want to buy, then even going to the physical store, buying it, then maybe returning 9 of the 10 shoe pairs that they bought, something like that could fall under product analytics. And I know that that is, for example, a use case that Segment has talked about in the past, which is a sort of a customer data platform that helps you send event data to various different locations. But going back to the retention question that I got early, that was just one of the first things that the CEO asked me to do when I joined as the first data person at Quizza was, you are responsible for retention, Steph. That isn't really a question, it's like a statement. And I didn't know what it meant in so many different ways. I didn't know what retention was, and I didn't know what it meant to be responsible for retention. But retention is defined as if someone comes and does something, what does it, like how big a proportion of people that come and do something then return later at some point and do that again. And it's sort of that use case is used to understand how engaging is a product. Is it something that you use on a daily basis? Is it something that you use on a weekly basis? Is it something that you could maybe build a SaaS product out of, like a subscription, software as a service, and create a subscription because people need to come back and back and back to it? So, for example, Headway or something, the meditation app, Headspace, sorry, would be an example that they would really want to have a great retention. They would want their users to want to return again and again and again to come back and meditate.
Okay, I'm certainly at DataCamp. We're primarily a subscription business. Having retention of customers is something we worry a lot about. So that's a nice example. Actually, since this is important, Krishnan, do you want to add some possible use cases of product analytics?
I mean, there are quite a few, and the spectrum of product analytics is so vast. We have customers, especially now with a lot of the physical products that people, or even digital products going subscription based. Product analytics becomes extremely important to be relevant to the customer, right? And it's become actually a lot more in the limelight. What I mean by that is brands are now extremely sensitive to understanding how customers use their product, engage with their product to make their product better. If you think about this, in the past, when Microsoft used to sell Word, they used to just sell it as a CD,
Exactly.
and they used to just give it to people, and then they didn't need to track how people are using it. Are they using it? Are they what parts of the Word are they using, etc. But once they move that online into a subscription-based model, people can actually, if they're not using it, they can actually stop using it, and they can actually stop subscribing to it. If you subscribe for a longer time, obviously Microsoft makes more money, but if you're not, you're actually making much lesser money out of the user. So the usage has become extremely important, not just putting the product on the person's desk. And that means that the company needs to start looking at what makes the user use the product. What are those trigger points that convert the user from just being a general user to an engaged user to being a committed user? In fact, Facebook actually talked about this a long time back, when they said that when you come um, onto the Facebook platform, they understood that if you connect with four more people, you're a Facebook user for life, right? And so that is one of the big reasons that suggested friends came onto their product, which is they understood that unless you build a network on Facebook, people will not want to continue to use the product. And that was product analytics at its core, which is basically to identify that trigger moment, or what we call aha moment, to find out what takes that user from becoming a trialist to buyer to an engaged user and to become a committed user. And that journey has become extremely important. So understanding usage patterns is almost absolutely critical, because behavior tells you a lot in terms of what the person thinks about your product. And then you can actually marry that into a lot of the intention that they are having, and you can predict a lot of things based on that parameters. Like, you can say that if the person has stopped using the product for some time, he's on risk of churn, because he's not using the product at all. He's going to wake up, right? And if he is not using certain features which he's using before, or if he's using certain features which he has not used before and he's struggling with it, you can say that he's having a challenge. So usage is a very core aspect of product analytics that people have to pay a lot of importance to. And the more you pay importance to it, you can make it better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that idea of you're looking at events and usage of features just to see how engaged are people with your product. Steph, it looked like you wanted to add something there.
Yeah, what I wanted to say here is I think if we take one more step back here and think, why does product analytics matter for a business leader, for the CEO? And it is because product analytics is the leading indicator for what your then lagging indicator will look like in a couple of months from now or a year from now. And a company's key performance indicator, the bottom line, is very often revenue, right? Where most businesses sustain by driving revenue, by driving growth. That's how we can keep people working at the organizations, keep working on building new business, developing the products further, so that when there's more competition in the market, we still have an answer to that. All those things. That is what happens in business, right? And so revenue matters a lot. But revenue is a lagging indicator, and product analytics, customer experience, those are the leading indicators that you use to predict how your revenue is going to go. So, for example, one of Avo's first customer, Patreon, like the CFO has had retention reports in their Avo, like in their financial documents, reporting to the CEO. Because that is a predictor of what the revenue will look like in a quarter from now, for example. So product analytics and understanding customer behavior is a fundamental piece of business today. That is that's the new world we live in. And that is because businesses are now built based on user experience. Even if you're building a physical product, you still need a superb digital experience around purchasing that product, or getting that product delivered to you, or even just getting customer service around that physical product. And you still want people to come back and buy more of that product, or some side effect of that product. That's just how business works today. And that is why Avo exists. Even our mission is to inspire better data cultures, so that teams can build better user experiences ultimately. So it's all about understanding the user experience so you can drive the bottom line.
Okay, I like the idea that it's going to give product analytics is going to tell you what your revenue is going to be in the future, rather than just you finding out, actually, we didn't make any money this quarter, and that being a disaster. You've got some kind of warning system in advance.
Yeah.
All right, so just while we're discussing sort of definitions of things, there are a lot of related ideas to this, like marketing analytics, customer analytics. How does product analytics relate to all these other sort of related ideas? Go on, Krishnan, do you want to take this?
Great question.
Sure. I think if I think about product analytics, that's the core, right? At the end of the day, a company is taking a product to the market, right? So one aspect of it is making sure that the product is absolutely catering to a customer need that's out there. That's absolutely there. So a lot of the product analytics is identifying, does the product have the necessary ingredients to address the need that it is sought after? And that's where product analytics is a big play. Now that's great. You can have a fantastic product, but if you don't have a market or you don't have a customer that knows about it, the product doesn't exist, right? So marketing analytics is about being able to educate the customer about the whole aspect of what the product is and where it will solve the person's need. And in some cases, these are latent needs. These are not necessarily known needs that the person has. We didn't know that we needed to have, we would love AirPods when we were very happy with the wired headsets, right? So there is a latent need that people liked it, the convenience came to it, and people like that now, right? So there are sometimes in which marketing analytics becomes even more important. Just having a great product is not there. You're actually addressing it. Even for needs which are well known, being able to connect the product to the market is where marketing analytics plays a lot. Now, customer analytics is very useful in understanding the customer's decision points and decision journey, and then placing the product and the message, the marketing message, at the right time to the customer, right? Imagine that you are a teenager and you get sold a mortgage product. What would you feel? You'll be like, why am I even talking about that, right? Whereas if a person has spent about 10 years renting and then you get sold a mortgage product, that is much more relevant. So it's the same customer. It's just that you have not talked to him at the right point of time. So the customer analytics is about that. So it's absolutely core. And I sometimes think that when we look in latent view at analytics, we almost don't want to silo it as product, marketing, and customer. We do that at specific use cases, but sometimes you need to tie all three together. And unless they all work together, you're going to have the symphony in which there are different parts that are playing different tunes and they are not in the sync. Yeah.
I like the idea of keeping the world in sync. So basically, you've got to, if you want to be successful, you've got to sell like the right product to the right person using the right message. So you need that product analytics and customer analytics and marketing analytics all working together.
Exactly.
Nice. Okay, I think I've got this. Okay, so let's talk about who needs to be involved in this. Which teams or roles tend to be involved in product analytics? Steph, do you want to go?
Yeah, and that's a great continuation of the previous question, which is, product analytics versus marketing analytics. And I think the important thing here is growth today is no longer only about customer acquisition. It is about retention and expansion of existing customers, keeping them and creating growth loops where they bring in more users. So who is product analytics for? In my experience, the growth teams are very often the first teams that start really obsessing over user experiences. Product teams have been doing it for a long time, but they also are very aggressive in talking to people, right? And they build things based on qualitative and quantitative information when they are building things, and then they see the performance of what they built. But because product teams, how they work, they aggressively iterate and continue to build the product, and they use product analytics on that journey. But the case is also the fact that when you've shipped something, most of the times you move on to the next thing on the roadmap, and you don't necessarily have that much time to iterate on what you did last. So even if you have the output of the product analytics saying like, oh, we really need to fix the drop off that's happening here when people are putting in their credit card, or when people are choosing what song they want to learn on their guitar in the Fender app or something like that. And you really want to change it, but you're already working on this new roadmap thing. Whereas growth teams inherently are obsessing over things like this and optimizing for where are our opportunities, our lowest hanging fruit, and really revamping the experience and increasing conversion rates to doing something, increasing the retention to doing something, increasing their intention to invite someone else in or something like that. So growth teams are very often the first people who really obsess over these metrics, product analytics metrics. even though engineers on product teams and product managers, they are often the first people who implement analytics events in the first sort of initial instincts. And then the marketing teams, they become these really important customers of the product analytics team or the product team or the growth team or the data team, who really consume information about product analytics, either very self-serve through tools like Mixpanel, Amplitude, Post Talk, things like that, or some data team builds a little more of like a less completely self-serve, but some sort of a self-serve dashboard in tools like Looker or Mode or something like that. So I would say those are all of the customers of it. But ultimately, again, these are information that the organizational strategy evolves around. So the company should be thinking about product analytics in its go-to-market strategy and its product strategy. So very high level. Over to Krishnan now, or back to you, Richie.
No, okay, maybe I'll summarize that. So I actually found that interesting that it's not the product team that is most involved in project analytics. And also that explains why a lot of products are terrible, because they say, okay, we'll do this agile, so we'll build it, we can always fix it later, and then actually they've moved on to the next thing. So that's interesting that it's actually the growth team that is generally the first team that's going to be making most use of product.
Driving it. I mean, they're the ones that really push for that becoming really core. And once there's a growth team in place, that often sort of leads to the product teams obsessing even more over these things. So.
Okay. All right. Krishnan, do you have anything to add to that on where product analytics lives within an organization?
I mean, I think the way, if you have a chief product officer, then obviously it lands in his remit. Product analytics is the core to understanding what the product needs to be. If the chief product officer is not a function that is there, it will land on the CEO's plate, because that's what he's taking to the market. One interesting thing that we have found with a lot of the analytics that we are doing on products is it's important to understand features of what the product is useful on. But more important, which is what I think Steph talked about, which is marketing, to understand the context in which the product is becoming important. And I'll give you an example, right? When we were analyzing flavors for potato chips or wafers, as you could call it, we found out that suddenly Himalayan salt became an extremely important flavor for a lot of people. We were like, why is that? Why is that something that people are very excited about? And the context was that there's a whole health conscious movement that people have, and the whole aspect was people thought that the pink salt or the Himalayan salt is healthier than the regular salt, right? And that was the context. Now, interestingly, that led to a new product introduction called Himalayan salt as a category into boutique, and now it's mainstream. But second is, marketing teams were able to use that message around it being the healthier salt to go through that, and that led into the messaging part of it. So you can look at product introductions, but it will be done in conjunction with marketing and customer messaging. And that's why analytics, sometimes it needs to think about just the product, but it also needs to think about the marketing and the customer aspects, or rather the customer aspects at least, to then find out how it can resonate in this. So sometimes these are functions that have to operate in tandem.
And
okay.
maybe to add one more point to it, and I think, Krishnan, you already touched on it though, one of the most important things for marketing people is to understand, am I bringing the right people in? So they really need to understand, like, the leads that I bring in, are they actually converting in the end? And for that, you need to have good, solid product analytics to understand what's happening.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Krishnan, you mentioned the idea that it's going to be a chief product officer who's probably end responsible for this. So can you talk me through, like, how would a chief product officer be involved in this, and are there any other members of the C-suite that need to care about product analytics?
So I think it depends on the product family, whether it's a technology product, it's a physical product, or this one. The chief product officer is the owner of the product ecosystem that the company is offering, right? And the idea to think about this is, in a product company, when you are looking at creating something that actually addresses a core need, you need to have the product officer to define the contours on where the product will reside and what does it play in, right? He has to absolutely align very clearly with the chief strategy officer and chief executive officer of the company to make sure that the product is the direction in which the company wants to head and do this. And for that, one thing that the chief product officer has to absolutely be in tune with is the market, which is where he takes input from what he's hearing from the marketing officer and the sales officer in terms of what's the market telling, what are the customers telling about the product, and that defines into the roadmap. And this also has to define into what should be the strategy of the company. So think about this person as getting inputs from the other C-suite, or being a person who's actually providing information to this, but he has to operate in conjunction with it. He can't operate in isolation and go and create a product sitting on the Himalayas, because that's not going to cater to the needs of, unless he's tuned to what the rest of the C-suite are talking about, because they are either taking it to the market or going to define it for the market.
Okay. Although I believe you get very good cell reception in the Himalayas these days, you can probably work remotely there if you wanted to. But yeah, I do agree. It's a good idea if the C-suite talk to each other and align on strategy. All right. So, Steph, can you talk me through what sort of skills does a product analyst need?
Love this. Okay, so I'll take a step back to just what sort of skills does an analyst need. And I often say that the best analysts, they typically don't answer your question with anything other than a question. That's sort of like a punny way to say that it's so important to be curious and to always be digging for the question behind the question. So whenever someone asks you something, when you are a product analyst at an organization, and someone asks you, how many people did this? What you should be trying to learn from that is, what is that person trying to accomplish in their job? And how can I better support them and drive them forward and be an activator and sort of be a strategic asset to the organization rather than a number fetcher. And so the best analysts are thinkers. They are questioners. They're like Sherlock Holmesy. They're really curious, and they're passionate about helping other people. And so, for example, some things that I like to encourage people to do when they are in a product analyst role is make sure they always reserve time for being proactive, not just getting stuck in reactive mode, answering questions and things like that. That's number one. And number two, always have it as an objective to teach people how to fish, not just fish for them. And then number three, just as much as you can, try to align with the business objective and understand that, and understand everyone that you're working with and their needs, because what you're doing as a product analyst, is you are building a product. You are building a data product. So the most valuable thing that you could do as a product analyst, and most important thing for you to do as a product analyst, is to understand what does it take to build a product, for two reasons. Because you're building a data product for the rest of the organization, and you're trying to create an organization of knowledge, and where data is actively being used to make decisions or build AI products or something out of it. And number two, you are trying to work with people who are trying to build a product, so it's really valuable for you to understand what problems they are trying to solve. So I could not recommend more, for example, reading Marty Kagan's book called Inspired, which is about building products, and it covers, we can dive deeper into that later. But ultimately, you need to understand, like, is your product, your data product, useful? Is it desirable by the market? Is it engineeringly feasible to build it? And is it business viable to build it? Like, will it take me too much time to build this, or something like that? So, just obsess over what it takes to build a product, be curious, and work with the people around you.
That just seems surprisingly important, that you need to understand how the product is built in order to be able to analyze the product as well. Krishnan, do you want to add to that? I don't know whether you want to go into any of the analytics skills that are involved in this.
Yeah. I think Steph brought out a few interesting points, and I'm actually going to get Steph to address some of my teams as well on some of the things. And I really liked some of the points that she brought out, which is one, in terms of answer the question with another question, right? And that's an extremely important point. And I'll take an example to that. We had a customer, an online customer, come to us and say, can you let us know what the churn on the customers is for the in this customer base, right? And our team went and started doing the analysis and presented the analysis. And when we presented the analysis, they said that, but this is not what I was looking for. And we said, but this is what you asked for. And what we realized is the definition of what that person had thought as churn and what we thought as churn was not the same. Because in a product, you sign up for many services which you don't use, right? And so what that person wanted was anybody who had not used the product in the last 90 days. He said, if you don't use the product in 3 months, you don't need the product ever, right? It's like the clothes that you have in your wardrobe that you don't use. You have churned out of them, right? And in online product, so that's what he wanted. And we defined it as 18 months if the person has not used the product in 18 months, right? And that became the foundational difference in terms of the analysis. And the analysis didn't make sense to that person because you have not thought about it. So you got to start with understanding, why is this question asked? And sometimes you need to almost be irritating to the person in terms of what you want to know absolutely all the context. Why are you asking me this? What do you really want from me? What are you looking to do with the analysis, right? And a lot of times we do the analysis and we don't know, why are they taking this analysis? Where is this question coming from, right? What are you hearing in the market? Is there something that you want to do with some of this analysis? What that helps in is, because especially in the operating model where we work with global delivery teams which do analytics, um, you can build all the SQL skills, the analytical skills, etc. But that ability to then tell the story from the analysis to address the problem is important. So I think the crux for us is, are you able to storyboard to your client, simplify the analysis to an insight which will help him make a decision, right? So if you want to help make a decision that drives impact, you need to understand the context and you need to be able to analyze, and that's a skill that is extremely important. Now, foundational skills in analysis is, you should be able to be comfortable with data. You just have to be able to look at data and be comfortable with it and say, I'm going to be able to analyze it. Or in our case, in latent view, we say you should torture data till it confesses. You should just basically be able to beat the hell out of it in terms of it. And not in a bad way, but in the terms of saying that you should be able to be very comfortable in valuing with data, looking at data, slicing and dicing it, and looking it. And the same concept of what Steph talked about, the curiosity, you need to keep asking the questions with your data, saying, why is this coming this way? Why is this segment overperforming? What is the specific things in terms of this segment, right? And you need to be keeping on questioning this. The second part of this that I think about is, in a lot of cases, is to make sure that you are benchmarking any analysis or things that you do with other analysis that is there. And there is a lot of information that's available out there. And now with generative AI, you can actually have systems that actually tell you what some of those things are, which is what are some of the best practices in looking at it. And it's absolutely important to do that as well as an analyst. So in addition to skills like SQL, R, Python, technical skills that you have, foundational stat and math skills which are extremely important for doing analytics. You can't explain correlation without knowing basics of correlations. You cannot explain basic stats without understanding what does this mean, what is independent variable, what is orthogonality. If you don't understand that, and you don't understand how two variables are going to be there, you can't do that. So those basics are there, but those basics can be taught very well. But what you have to totally understand is, all of that has to be applied with understanding the full context. And the consumer on the other end is not looking for how you did it, but he wants to make sure that you've done it well. But what does this mean for him, and how does this so you need to be able to simplify it. A lot of times an analyst, and this becomes a big problem with us, is spends a lot of time talking about how he did the analysis. What is the depth of analysis? This model, this thing, this had so many variables, this had 20,000 variables, this told this was the accuracy metric, this was, all of that is great. What does it mean? And I remember doing this once with a technology firm, and the CMO that told me, and we presented this 30-page analysis, and then the person said, what do you want me to do? And we were like, we had actually not spent time thinking about what we want to do. We were just so happy in presenting the analysis, and we were so happy that it was statistically rigorous, beautiful results, beautiful model. And then we had to take and then we said, you know what, we'll come back to you. And we were able to, and that's when it got me thinking that it's not, the power of analysis is in the actual recommendation that you're able to do, which powers the decisions and insights, right? And that's extremely important for the analyst to have. If he's able to connect to the context and able to tell the story from his analysis, then he'll be a very powerful analyst, is what I feel.
Okay,
Yes,
yeah.
+1 on that. And I like this is exactly what I meant by asking a question back. And I think on that note, Krishnan, one of my favorite questions to ask is, what action will you take based on the answer I give you to this question?
Yeah.
Having said that, very commonly, and sorry to jump in again, Richie, here with this, but sometimes you just have to do research before you can even start imagining what insights you will derive from your research. So sometimes you just haven't looked at some data and you're just looking for findings. And what's interesting about that is like, that's how data or analytics is so different from software development. When you're doing software development, you have uncertainty around the effort that you will put towards a fairly certain output, at least the goal of the output. In data, you have uncertainty around the effort towards an uncertain output. In very many cases, you just have to start doing the work. Maybe you'll find nothing. But the most important thing to remember there, though, is that no finding and like discovering that there is no correlation or there's nothing to take action on here is also a finding. We have to remember that still, but it can be disappointing.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's like I don't even need to ask questions to have a chat. Let's have a little drink. No, actually, since you both said asking questions is a very important skill, I should probably continue continue them. All right. So, for companies who want to get started with this, you're trying to build out a product analytics capability. What makes a good first project? Have you got any? Because we talked about a lot of use cases. Like, where did you get started? Go on, Steph, you go first this time.
Two angles to this, and they depend on who this is coming from. Is this a top-down effort? Is this are you a single product analyst and there's nothing going on in your organization? Are you an engineer and there's nothing going on in their organization? Or you're a product man? If there's so it depends a lot on whether you are starting at the level of really having to lobby, or whether you have a lot of buy-in already. So that's the two different that's the first question you have to figure out, like, is there buy-in for this? And I will start by saying, if there is no interest in the organization for being or becoming data-driven, then you are up for a very uphill battle. And so you'll have to do a lot of sort of relationship building and investigation and things like that. If there's interest and you're sort of you're trying to figure out where to get started, I always recommend starting small. You always want to start by building some sort of a case study. So, for example, if you can find a single product team that is working on something, working on an initiative, and they're about to release something, and you can say, okay, great. What is the goal of the release? What are the metrics that we will literally look at a dashboard for? Like, are we going to look at the day one retention and how adding this screen impacted the day one retention? Could be an example. That could be an example of a metric. And then what are the analytics events that we need to track in the product to be able to visualize these metrics? So that is the smallest possible scope that you could start with. And if you're starting at that end, then I recommend starting with such a small metric that you would be just like, don't try to measure the complete impact of your product or anything like that. Just try to start small to figure out, like, wow, this is really interesting to be data-driven when we're building our products. And here's a case study for how this small product team was able to add 3 analytics events into the product and send them to this data platform. And then 2 weeks later, make a decision that we actually had to iterate on the sign-up screen and do this, and then that cost that. So that's a really great way to think about it, like start this really small way. If you are, however, on like in the possibility of sort of getting a company-wide rallying together, and you already have a bunch of teams that are doing it this way, then a really good aspiration to have, and maybe like as an objective for you to have as a data leader or as an analyst that is sort of trying to step into a data leader role if there isn't a data leader, then what you want to try to do is you want to interview the most important stakeholders in the organization and get them to work with you on defining a company-wide North Star metric for your product, which is what is the most important thing, most important sort of leading indicator that will actually drive revenue for the organization when it comes to user experience. So that's like that's a bigger lift. And that's not where you should start if you're trying to rally people together and sort of build a case for doing this. But that is always what you should strive for, is sort of having a North Star metric for your product analytics, which has 5 to 6 key input metrics on how product teams can influence the North Star metrics and then drive revenue from there.
Yep.
Okay, so if you're right at the beginning, I like the idea of doing something where you can show results in just a few weeks, and then you can get the momentum going. But eventually, you're going to want to tackle a larger project. Christian, do you have anything to add to that, like on how you go about getting started improving product analytics?
No, I think it's important to look at the North Star metric, but it's also important to relate it to the business objective or the strategy of what the company wants, right? I'll just give you an example. And we all know that you want to increase revenue and reduce costs, and that's fairly straightforward. So when we were working with one technology firm, they said they absolutely want to be able to move the revenue metrics on different segments, and revenue is a fairly important thing, which is kind of self-explanatory. There's nobody who says that I don't want to increase revenue, right? But when we were doing product analytics to this, we understood that because of the way the product or way the company operates, connecting it to revenue is extremely hard. So what we needed to do when we were looking at the data was actually identify a metric that is the most closely related to revenue, into showing that if this metric moves, this is a leading indicator to revenue moving in some time. And that was actually intent to purchase. And we were able to identify that from the survey, right? And this is a metric that was there. We did a whole lot of analytics and understanding what is that one metric. And then we looked at that metric, and then we did a driver and saying, okay, intent to purchase. Now, how do you move intent to purchase, right? And then we realized that there are sub metrics that intent to purchase has that are actionable metrics, which then move intent to purchase. So being able to identify one, what is it that you want to influence? Second, how can that be influenced by a subset of metrics is extremely important, because that then tells you the charter of how you want to define that. So you need to absolutely have what are you playing with in terms of it. The second part of it is you need to look at the spectrum of what you want to do with what you have, right? It's great to say you want to do all this analytics, and then you say, oh, I don't have any data. So what are you going to do about it? So that's the starting point to this. So you need to marry the what you want with the what you have, and then kind of say, let me get the first wins with what I have, then make the case to get to the what are the things that I need to start getting in to do some of the more this one. So I think that's the ability to create that cross section of what we need to get and what we have will give you the first things of what you want to develop in the initial part.
Okay, so I guess when you're getting started, there might be some gaps in having the data in the right place, in the right format, in order to be able to calculate the metrics that you want to calculate to measure whatever it is. Since you've both mentioned metrics recently, can you talk me through what are the most common metrics? Like, what are the things that you would generally measure as part of product analytics? Steph, do you want to give some examples?
Yeah, sure. One of the first things that is very common to map out when you're understanding how your product works is some sort of a conversion funnel. The conversion funnel can be complex or simple. For example, the one that Krishnan mentioned or referred to earlier, which was the infamous initial growth metric for Facebook, which was time to, I thought it was 10 friends, but I also had 7 friends, and Krishnan mentioned 4. And there's probably a lot of urban myths about this metric, but this is sort of a conversion funnel, even though it's time-based. So they were trying to push people to get 10 friends as fast as possible, because that was a super predictive indicator on how successful those people would be in building their own network and then becoming Facebook users. And so it is a type of a conversion funnel, even though it's a little bit complex, so, and it has a time based into it. But that is a really common first journey that I take people through when I'm thinking through, like, how would you even start on your product analytics journey? Because the question is, what are the most important actions that your users need to take in your product? It is the aha moment that Krishnan also referred to earlier in the conversation. And it's something like, okay, you arrive to some sort of a website or the app store or something, and then you go and you create an account, or you download an app, or you do something, and then you do something, there's an aha there that pushes you and prompts you to become, a dedicated user of something. Like the aha moment is an experience that you experience, and it's an indicator that you will become a recurring user or a paying user or some of some sorts. And so even though this is very commonly not necessarily a linear funnel and not simple, it's not a single aha moment maybe, or it's like you have now reached 10 friends, or it could be something like that. But that is a very simple beginning way to start thinking about it, even though that it's far from being simple to really map out in reality, because understanding what is the aha moment of your users actually takes a lot of research and analysis, right? And you typically have to have data in place already, at least a lot of qualitative interviews to be able to map out what is the actual aha moment. But that will guide you towards what are maybe the first 4 events that I need to implement into my product. My gut feeling says that this is a really important step in the discovery journey for the user. So I should implement an analytics event whenever people do this, so I can confirm or reject my hypothesis that this is an aha moment that predicts people's ability to become dedicated users or paying users of the product. I think that's a really important sort of example. And then I also mentioned, of course, retention. And sort of, I guess retention is almost like an extended version of a conversion funnel, because you have step 1 and then you have repetition of a step 2 is the retention definition, really. I think those are probably the most common ones, and that ties into what's really commonly talked about today, which is growth loops and people's ability to enter through some sort of path and then come and return and do this thing again, like do a thing again and again and again, that then becomes like an orbit and pulls more people into using the product and all sorts of things like that.
Okay, that's lots of great examples there. I do like the idea of like figuring out what the points in a user journey in terms of getting started with your product that's going to make you want to continue to use it. Okay, we're running out of time for questions, so I want to move on to the next one. Are there any common mistakes organizations make when they start trying to improve their product analytics? Christian, can you take this?
I think in a lot of cases, there are many things that people can do wrong in terms of analytics, but I think doing analytics for analytics' sake is the first big problem, right? Rather than having a core need, because you can keep analyzing till the cows come home, right? But if you're not going to take a decision, or if it is not rooted in the why are we doing this, we can get caught up in terms of doing a lot of the data analysis, and and we have heard this, the death by PPT or death by analysis or analysis paralysis, etc. And that's something that a lot of product analytics teams suffer with, because we have now started getting a lot of data, especially usage data, customer data, marketing data, and we start giving a lot of this. And the second big part of it is looking at analytics with siloed data with not getting the full context. So it's very dangerous. You can actually analyze and make incorrect product decisions by looking at a customer segment and analyzing it without looking at the entire context, right? If for example, if at the start of COVID we just said, oh, I just look at retail store sales and say that sales is dropping, let's close down retail stores, and did not know that COVID was happening, or COVID was the reason and lockdowns were the reason, that's basically game set match. There you're actually doing a decision which is not rooted in the context. And that's a very simple example, but nuanced examples of this is what happens is you do not understand the context. You don't understand that maybe there are certain things. For example, you saw usage dropping and you say, oh, product needs a thing. Maybe it was an outage on the system that caused it, or maybe there's a link that was broken that actually caused some of this, etc. And we have found out that sometimes that ability to not read through the context and making this with half-baked data is more dangerous. And in some of those cases, I tell them the analytics is extremely important to make sure that it has covered all its bases, understood the context before doing that. And it's extremely important, especially because product analytics is like you can make things, you can make or break things with the decisions that you make on product.
Okay. I'm now thinking of an example of like a shopkeeper in 2020 who's just wondering why there's no one in his store because, yeah, I hadn't realized COVID was happening. But I do like the idea. I get the feeling like often in product analytics, you're going to find something weird's happened. And then you both mentioned the idea that you need to be able to ask questions. So saying, okay, well, I wonder why this weird thing's happened, and then be able to dig into that a little bit further. All right. So let's talk about success stories. Steph, have you seen any examples of companies where they've put a lot of effort into their product analytics and they've seen a benefit?
Absolutely. And this actually touches on the biggest mistake, which I'd also love to touch on, which is it's so tied together, because the successes that I've seen is when people really make this a fundamental part of their decision-making process. They take ownership of why they have product analytics. So product teams get very inspired by increasing conversion funnel somewhere. And just quick thought about the mistake there. I think one of the biggest mistakes that organizations make is considering product analytics a function of some analysts somewhere. And the story that I shared in the beginning, where I was held responsible for retention, is very backwards, because I was not a product manager, I was a data person. So what does it mean that I'm responsible for retention? I am not making product decisions. My job, what's great about this positioning for me is that I then get prompted to think, well, what can I actually find in the data that might influence the product teams to make really exciting and good decisions about their retention? But ultimately, it should be the product teams that should we want them to become invested in making better decisions based on data. And that's what I've found interesting in driving a culture where that happens. Is if you start by building, like finding an ally in a product engineer or a product manager that are sort of data curious people, and you get them excited on your journey. And this is a segue into a success story. This is what we did at QuizUp, for example. I was there, responsible for retention, but nobody in product or engineering really cared about data. We had maybe one or two engineers that occasionally looked at Mixpanel dashboards and asked me, like, am I doing this right? And I'm like, oh, I'm excited that you're even looking at dashboards. And then we just decided to inject ourselves really aggressively in every single product cycle kickoff, to make sure that the product team was aware that when they were deciding to ship something, then we were working towards a company-wide goal. And the company-wide goal is to increase retention of users, because increasing retention of users is the foundation of building our business, which was a game/social network. And one of the major decisions that we made because of this was we actually increased the social capabilities of the product, because we saw some indicators in the product data that people who really connected with other people when they were playing with each other at QuizUp, interacting with each other, chatting with each other, they really got engaged, and they started learning really deeply about specific subjects in the topic. We even saw some people getting married. They met by playing the Big Bang Theory, and then all of a sudden they're married, and the CEO got invited to like more than 10 weddings around the world that happened because of this. So is it a dating app? I don't know. Anyway, so the success story there is we saw these indicators in our product data. People that chat, they are really much more engaged. So what we did, we added the ability at the end game screen. As soon as the game ended, we added the ability to start a chat with the opponent immediately, and that really increased their engagement with that opponent, and even started building relationship, and they then befriended them. And another thing that we added is for every single topic in the game, it was a quiz game. we added like a feed of social things that you could post, and that also really increased our retention. I think it was ended up being increased by 60% in the end. So those are some success stories.
I'm still slightly amazed that people got married from a quiz game, but that does seem like a very good success story. Yeah, before we go to audience questions, Krishnan, do you have any success stories?
I mean, there are many out there in terms of success stories. But what I've actually noticed with a lot of our clients is when they look at the data with a lot of the context. In fact, one of our clients, when we looked at a lot of the data that we were doing, and this was a payment processing firm, we found a lot of people actually gifting money through the payment app as a transaction. And when we noticed, one of the things that they had is there's a comments in the comments they used to say happy birthday, happy graduation, and things like that. And what we noticed is there was a significant amount of this transactions happening, which was P2P transactions with this note happening. And that's when an analyst came and said, but that seems very impersonal that you get an email with saying that this money was credited into your account, and which was fine for any regular transaction. But when you're giving a message, a celebratory message, a simple gift card or a simple envelope that will be there to open will be there, and that created the gifting application within that. In fact, Amazon does that also in what they call the gifting part of it. That became a $300 million business, that one app, right? um, I do remember one of our analysts, which works with a marketplaces client of ours. He was going through a lot of the promotions that they kept running, and he was just over lunch he came up, and he said that I've been analyzing a lot of this data, and I think there is a promotion that we should run. And he gave this idea of this promotion to the product manager in the marketplace, right? um, and this is by analysis of a lot of the campaigns, and he came up with this. And that promotion that he came through, and he gave a 10-minute definition of what it should be over lunch. That was the single biggest promotion that they held in that year in terms of this. And the analyst in our team was well recognized for that amount of effort. So that nugget of wisdom that he was able to prove through this. And that's what we have done. And we have got countless such stories. In fact, one of the things we do at Latent View is we have what we call the insights repository, where we ask our teams to actually share, okay, you do a lot of the work and you're doing analysis, clients are happy with you, but share with us the aha moment that your client has had and said, I'm so happy that you provided this insight that delivered this impact. And that insight and impact is measured by Latent View, right? We have a goal, an organizational goal that I task myself on and saying, am I able to deliver impact to my clients with the analysis that I do? And I hold myself responsible for it, and the teams are responsible up to the analyst level. And which has been a great success for us, because we are seeing more and more collaboration with clients to drive impact and decisions. And so we have got a lot of success stories. And there are a lot of clients which are very brilliant in terms of how they are doing product analytics. Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. I mean, I think the thing that both of your stories said about success is an analyst has found some feature or some idea that is just popular with users, and you've taken that and run with it, and then it's turned into like a great product that's brought in a lot of money. All right, since we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left, we've got time for a couple of questions from the audience. Anyone in the audience, if you've got questions for Steph or Christian, please do ask now. Okay, so this question comes from Miguel.
I saw that one.
So,
it's a good one.
Miguel asks, based on your experience, does a live refresh dashboard help teams pivot to more profitable product decisions, or is it just transparency, or just for transparency or tracking sake? So are live refresh dashboards actually useful?
Exactly. That's a great question, Miguel. Thank you for sharing that question. So first of all, I want to start by taking a step back and refresh on what I recommended earlier, which is read Inspired by Marty Cagan, which is a book about building products, because a live refresh dashboard is a product that you would build for your customers, which is the people in your organization that might be making decisions on this. And you need to think about what are the usability, the desirability, the engineering feasibility, and the business viability of building that live dashboard. And I am sure that when you start looking at the desirability of that live dashboard, which happens when you start interviewing the people that you expect to be using that dashboard, that you will learn a lot. So that is my initial and basic answer. But my guess is that a live dashboard is not, and it's very rarely, what they require to make really impactful decisions, unless they are like Uber deciding whether now should be a surge price and they haven't already implemented the algorithm that automatically increases the surge price. So in most cases, live refresh with really recent data is not what makes or breaks a business, I would say. However, understanding and knowing how fresh the data that you're looking at is really important. So for example, if there's a 24-hour delay of the update of your dashboard, then whoever is looking at the dashboard needs to understand that. You need to make sure they understand that, because otherwise they have other expectations of what they're looking at in the dashboard and they start distrusting it. So you will discover all of these things when you actually talk to the people that use your dashboard. What are they trying to make decisions on? How frequently do they really need to make those decisions? So that's sort of my answer. I know it's meta. The short answer is unlikely, but your job is really to figure out who needs that dashboard and why, and does a live refresh really make or break?
Yeah, I guess since most product features take weeks or months to build, then the difference between something updating every 24 hours versus real-time updating is probably not really that big. All right, so yeah, we've got time for one more. Filippo asks, as a recent graduate, what do you think is the best way to start a career as an analyst nowadays? Definitely a tricky question for another question. Christian, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think the first important thing with being a career analyst or wanting to do the job as an analyst, and this takes me back about 16 years when I wanted to move into the field of data analytics, is there are a lot of options out there in the market right now for data analytics, right? This is data analytics, AI, as the case may be. So I would say pick something that you're really passionate about. It could be an industry that you're passionate about, or it could be a product that you're passionate about, or it could be a function that you're passionate about. Understand what do you really like researching about, what do you like reading about, what do you like really improving, what do you have intuitively better sense for, and then look to get into that with data. Because what I found is people who generally are very uh, excited about the space in general, when they then use data in addition to that, it's a very powerful combination, because it's called business plus data, and that's very and plus the tech, and that's very powerful. An example for this I know is when we did this work for marketplaces client, there was one analyst who used to shine extremely well in terms of the analytics and the insights he gave, and I was like, what really sets him apart? Because otherwise, from a technical skills, he always seemed very similar to the others. And one of the things I found out was he was a significant consumer of the product as well. He used to do a lot of transactions, actually interact with the product, find out what's happening, etc. That gave him a lot of business experience of what the product is. And imagine then you're doing the product analytics for it. Right? You just become much more wholesome in terms of how you're able to do this. In fact, one of my friends who actually worked at Walmart.com, and he was a very senior person there, he used to order from Walmart.com all the time, and he used to keep doing deliveries, understand the challenges that were there, and then put that back. Not hear the surveys and things like that. He was actually using the product to get some of those insights to do this, right? So you need to really be passionate about the first thing. And when you have an option in the career, I think it's best to go to a function or an industry or a company that you're really passionate about, that you really read about. Then the data and tech will all make so much sense for you in terms of, that's my only advice. Yeah.
Absolutely, it's easier to get a job if you actually know the company that that you're applying to. All right, we're past time, so I'm going to wrap up there. But thank you so much, Steph. Thank you so much, Christian. Christian, that was just a really nice, productive discussion. I think I felt like I learned a lot. I hope the audience did as well. Before everyone dashes off, we have got some more webinars lined up for you. So next session is going to be next Tuesday. We've got a session on full stack data engineering with Python. So that's going to be a fun one. We're going to be analyzing some gravitational wave data or something, I believe. And then on Wednesday, we've got a session on best practices for launching an internal data science bootcamp. So please do come back for those. Use the QR code at the top left to register for future events. All right. Thank you once again, Stefan Krishnan. Thank you to Reese for moderating. Thank you to everyone who asked a question. Thank you to everyone who showed up today. I hope to see you all again soon. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Ricky. Thanks.
Thank you.